Picture this: the Sierra Nevada mountains, November 1846. The sky has turned the color of old bone, and the first snowflakes are falling on a line of wagons that should have reached California 2 months ago. 87 men, women, and children stare up at a mountain pass that was supposed to be their gateway to paradise. Instead, it will become their tomb. The temperature is dropping, the food supplies are nearly gone, and behind them, the trail has already disappeared beneath 3 feet of snow. You know this story, or at least you think you do. You have been told it was about courage, about the pioneer spirit, about the triumph of human endurance. But that is the version America wanted you to hear. The sanitized tale written by survivors who made pacts of silence, who burned their diaries, who changed their names and scattered to the edges of the continent. The truth was buried in unmarked graves, erased from county records, and deliberately forgotten by a young nation desperate to believe in its own mythology of westward expansion. This is not a story about heroes. This is a story about what happens when a series of small, rational decisions leads to unthinkable consequences. About how quickly civilization collapses when the snow keeps falling and the rescue parties stop coming. About the measures human beings will take to see another sunrise. And about the silence that follows when society decides that some truths are too dark to remember. Tonight, we open the file that America sealed shut over a century and a half ago. Close your eyes. Imagine you are standing in Independence, Missouri, April 1846. The air smells of wood smoke, leather, and possibility. Around you, families are loading wagons with everything they own, their faces bright with dreams of California gold, of fertile land, of a new beginning in paradise. You hear the laughter of children playing between the wagon wheels, the sound of men arguing about which route to take, the creak of axles being tested one last time. This is the sound of hope. Remember it. You will not hear it again. You know this story, don't you? The great westward migration, the triumph of American determination, the brave pioneers who conquered the wilderness and built a nation from sea to shining sea. That is what the history books tell you. That is what the monuments celebrate. But history is written by those who survive. And some stories are deliberately buried because they reveal truths too dark for national mythology. This is not the story of triumph. This is the story of the trail that ate its own children, of a family whose name you will never find in official records because it was systematically erased, of decisions made in sunlight that led to darkness so complete that over a century later, descendants still refuse to speak their ancestors' names aloud. Before we descend into the snow and shadow of the Sierra Nevada, before we open the diaries that were meant to be burned, I want to ask something of you. If you believe these forgotten chapters of American history deserve to be remembered, if you believe that the darkest truths reveal the most about human, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Your support keeps the candle burning in the archives of the forgotten. It allows us to keep excavating the stories that institutions would prefer stayed buried. And let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is. This is a story best told in darkness. Welcome to the Midnight Archives. The year is 1846. America is drunk on manifest destiny, on the idea that the entire continent is waiting to be claimed. The Mexican-American War is just beginning, and California hangs like ripe fruit ready to fall into American hands. Every week, wagon trains leave Independence and St. Joseph, heading west on the Oregon Trail before splitting south toward California. Most will make it, some will not. One party, in particular, will become a cautionary tale so horrific that newspapers will compete to publish the most sensational version, and then, mysteriously, the story will disappear from public record entirely. They called themselves the Reed Donner Party. 87 people, 23 wagons. Enough food, they believed, to last 4 months. The journey was supposed to take 4 months. They would arrive in California before the first snow. That was the plan. That was always the plan. Let me introduce you to the architects of this disaster. James Reed, 45 years old, a furniture maker from Springfield, Illinois, traveling with his wife Margaret and 4 children. A man of ambition and pride, Reed commissioned a custom wagon so large and comfortable it was called the Palace Car, with 2 stories, feather beds, and a cast-iron stove. His fellow travelers mocked it. They called it Reed's Folly. They had no idea how prophetic that name would be. George Donner, 62 years old, a prosperous farmer, traveling with his wife Tamsin, a former schoolteacher, and their 5 daughters. Tamsin brought books, paints, and pressed flowers. Planning to write about their journey, her diary would become evidence in an unofficial trial that never appeared in any courthouse. And then there was Lansford Hastings, the man who was not there, but whose shadow hangs over this entire story like a noose. A lawyer, a self-promoter, and a liar. In 1845, he published a guidebook called The Emigrant's Guide to Oregon and California. In it, he described a shortcut that would save travelers 350 miles. He called it the Hastings Cutoff. He had never actually traveled the entire route himself. That detail he neglected to mention. The guidebook promised an easy passage through the Wasatch Mountains and across the Great Salt Lake Desert. Green meadows, gentle grades, abundant water. It was all a lie, but it was a lie printed in a book. And in 1846, books carried the weight of truth. On July 20th, 1846, at a place called the Little Sandy River in present-day Wyoming, the Reed-Donner party faced a choice. The established route, the proven route, continued northwest to Fort Hall before turning south. It was well-marked, well-traveled, and safe. Or they could take the Hastings Cutoff, the shortcut that promised to save them weeks of travel. They had a letter from Hastings himself, left at Fort Bridger, urging them to follow. They chose the shortcut. That single decision, made on a sunny summer day with the smell of wildflowers in the air, would doom them all. Here is what they did not know. Hastings had left Fort Bridger only days before with another wagon train, promising to mark the trail and wait for them. He did not wait. He did not mark the trail adequately, and the route he led them on was not the gentle passage his guidebook described. It was a nightmare of dense timber, impassable canyons, and murderous terrain. For the first week, nothing seemed wrong. The trail was difficult, but manageable. Then they reached the Wasatch Mountains, and the hell began. The mountains were choked with vegetation so thick that men had to cut through it with axes, yard by yard, day after day. Wagons had to be lowered down cliffs with ropes. The promised green meadows were steep canyons. The gentle grades were nearly vertical drops. It took them 3 weeks to cross terrain that should have taken 3 days. 3 weeks of back-breaking labor, of broken axles and dying oxen, of watching their food supplies diminish and their calendar pages turn toward autumn. They emerged from the Wasatch 36 days behind schedule. 36 days. Remember that number? Then came the desert. The Great Salt Lake Desert was supposed to be 40 miles of dry lake bed, easily crossed in 2 days. It was 80 miles of hell. The guidebook lied. Hastings lied. Or perhaps he simply did not care. The salt stretched to the horizon in every direction, blinding white under the sun, with no water, no grass for the animals, no shade. The temperature climbed above 100 degrees. Oxen collapsed in their yokes. Families abandoned their wagons to save themselves, carrying their children on their backs while the desert wind burned their throats raw. When they finally reached the other side, they had lost dozens of cattle, abandoned 4 wagons, and consumed a month's worth of food. It was September, and they were still 800 miles from California. The mountains ahead were the Sierra Nevada, and the first snow usually fell in early November. They had maybe 6 weeks. Maybe. James Reed's palace car, the wagon everyone mocked, now sat abandoned in the salt. The man who built it was about to face a reckoning of a different kind. On October 5th, during an argument about the failing oxen, Reed killed a teamster named John Snyder with a knife. Whether it was murder or self-defense depends on who you ask. The surviving accounts contradict each other. What is certain is that the company voted to banish Reed from the party. He was sent ahead on horseback to seek help in California, leaving his family behind to face whatever came next without him. The party fractured. Arguments became fistfights. Families stopped speaking to each other. The social bonds that held civilization together were fraying thread by thread. And ahead of them, invisible in the autumn haze, the Sierra Nevada waited. The mountains knew what was coming. The mountains always know. On October 23rd, they reached the Truckee River, now called the Truckee, at the base of the final mountain pass. They were exhausted, underfed, and nearly out of time. But they were close. The pass was only 12 miles away. On the other side was California, was safety, was survival. They made camp to rest the oxen and gather strength for the final push. That night, the temperature dropped. The wind changed direction. And in the darkness, so quietly that no one heard it coming, the first snow began to fall. By morning, it was 3 feet deep and still falling. The pass was gone, buried beneath a white wall that would not melt until spring. The trap had closed. They did not know it yet, but they were already dead. They just had not stopped breathing. Let us go back. Back before the snow, before the fear, before the trap closed. Back to a time when the future still glittered like gold in a California river. Because to understand how 87 people walked willingly into their own graves, you must first understand what they were walking toward. You must understand the lie of paradise. The year is 1845. California is not yet part of the United States. It belongs to Mexico, technically, but barely. The Mexican government has almost no presence there. And the handful of American settlers already living in the territory send back letters that read like fever dreams. Land so fertile you can grow 3 crops a year, rivers thick with salmon. Gold, they whisper, though nobody has proved it yet. Mountains of gold, just waiting to be picked up off the ground. America believes these letters because America wants to believe them. The nation is barely 70 years old, still raw and hungry, convinced that God himself has ordained its expansion from coast to coast. They call it manifest destiny. It sounds holy. It sounds inevitable. It is neither. It is simply greed dressed in religious language. But it is a powerful drug. And by 1846, thousands of families are selling everything they own to buy a wagon and a dream. The guidebooks feed the fever. There are dozens of them, published by men who have never been west of the Mississippi, filled with descriptions copied from other guidebooks, errors multiplying like bacteria. But one guidebook stands above the rest in its audacity and its lies. The Emigrant's Guide to Oregon and California by Lansford Warren Hastings. published in 1845 in Cincinnati. It promises a route so easy that even women and children could manage it. Hastings writes with the confidence of a prophet. He describes meadows that do not exist, rivers that run dry, and mountains that are impassable. Hastings is not stupid. He is ambitious. He dreams of becoming the founding father of an independent California republic, with himself as president. To achieve this, he needs American settlers, thousands of them, pouring into California to outnumber the Mexican presence. His guidebook is not a map, it is bait, and the Reed and Donner families swallow it whole. James Fraser Reed is 45 years old in the spring of 1846. He is a furniture maker in Springfield, Illinois, successful enough to be comfortable, but not wealthy enough to be satisfied. He has 4 children, a wife named Margaret, who suffers from terrible headaches, and a mother-in-law, Sarah Keyes, who is 70 years old and dying of tuberculosis. Reed's neighbors include a young lawyer named Abraham Lincoln, who will later become president and lead the nation through a civil war. But in 1846, Lincoln is nobody, and Reed is a man who looks west and sees his future. Reed is meticulous. He spends months planning. He commissions a special wagon, the palace car, built with 2 stories, spring-loaded seats, and even a small stove. His wife and mother-in-law will not suffer on this journey. He will make sure of it. He hires teamsters, buys the finest oxen, packs enough supplies for 6 months. He reads every guidebook he can find. He believes he is prepared. He has no idea he is planning his own funeral. George Donner is 62, a farmer from Sangamon County, Illinois, a neighbor of Reed's. He is traveling with his 3rd wife, Tamsin, who is 44 and everything George is not. She is educated, cultured, a former school teacher who speaks several languages. She brings books, art supplies, and pressed flowers. She plans to write a memoir of their journey and publish it when they reach California. The memoir will never be finished. The pages that do exist will be used as evidence in a silence that lasts over a century. The Donners have 5 daughters between them. Elitha, 14. Leanna, 12. Frances, 6. Georgia, 4. Eliza, 3. Remember their names. The youngest 2 will survive. The others will learn what it means to watch your parents die slowly. The party gathers in Springfield in April of 1846. 32 people from the Reed and Donner families, plus hired hands and teamsters. They are not traveling alone. They join a larger wagon train heading west. About 300 wagons in total, a moving city of canvas and hope. The journey to California takes 4 months in a good year. They are leaving in April. They will arrive in August, with weeks to spare before the mountain passes close for winter. The math is simple. The math is safe. The math is wrong. On April 16, 1846, they leave Springfield. Tamsin Donner writes in her diary, "We go with high hopes to the west." Sarah Keyes, Reed's mother-in-law, lies in the palace car, cushioned by feather mattresses, watching the familiar landscape of Illinois fade behind her. She will not live to see the mountains. She dies on May 29th, near the Big Blue River in Kansas. And they bury her beside the trail with a headstone that will weather away to nothing. She is the lucky one. Her death is gentle. She dies surrounded by family, and she dies believing her grandchildren will make it to paradise. The trail is crowded that spring. Thousands of wagons, all heading west, raising dust clouds that can be seen for miles. At night, the camps stretch along the river like a temporary city. People trade goods, share information, and tell stories about California. Some families turn back, spooked by rumors of Indian attacks or cholera outbreaks. The Reed and Donner families keep going. They have sold everything. There is nothing to go back to. On July 19th, they reach Little Sandy River in present-day Wyoming. Here, the trail splits. The main route continues northwest to Fort Hall before turning south to California. It is the proven route, taken by thousands. But there is another option. A letter waits for them at Fort Bridger, written by Lansford Hastings himself. He has gone ahead with another wagon train, he writes, and he urges them to follow. The shortcut will save them 350 miles. 350 miles. Weeks of travel. They will reach California before September, with plenty of time to spare. The wagon train holds a meeting. Some families argue for the proven route. Others, seduced by the promise of saved time, vote for the cutoff. The debate grows heated. Finally, the train splits. Most continue on the main trail. 87 people, including the Reed and Donner families, choose the shortcut. They are not fools. They are not reckless. They are following a published guidebook written by a man who claims to be an expert. They are making a rational decision based on the information available to them. It is the wrong decision. But they will not know that until it is far too late. As they turn southwest toward the Hastings cutoff, Tamsin Donner writes again in her diary. The entry is brief, almost unremarkable. We take the new road to California. Years later, when historians search for her diary, it will be missing. The family will claim it was lost. More likely, it was burned. Because what Tamsin wrote in the months that followed was not meant for public consumption. It was evidence of choices made in desperation, of moral lines crossed in darkness, of humanity stripped away one frozen day at a time. They do not know it yet, but they have just left the map. They have stepped off the edge of the known world and into blank space, where the guidebook's promises dissolve like morning mist. Ahead of them lie the Wasatch Mountains, the Salt Lake Desert, and the Sierra Nevada. Behind them, the proven trail continues without them, carrying other families safely to California. On July 20th, 1846, the last day anyone saw them on the main trail, a man named Edwin Bryant passes them going the opposite direction. He is heading east, having just crossed the Hastings cutoff himself. He tries to warn them. He tells them the shortcut is a disaster, that the desert is twice as wide as Hastings claimed, that the mountains are impassable. He begs them to turn back. They thank him for his concern and keep going. Later, Bryant will testify that he told them. He will say he tried, but his warnings are wind against their determination. This is the thing about disasters. They are never sudden. They are built brick by brick, decision by decision, each one seeming reasonable at the time. The Hastings cutoff was not a mistake. It was a choice. The decision to keep going after the Wasatch Mountains delayed them was not a mistake. It was a choice. The choice to rest at Truckee Lake instead of pushing immediately for the pass was not a mistake. It was a choice based on exhausted oxen and human limits. But choices have consequences. And the consequence of these choices is waiting for them in the mountains ahead. Patient and cold and absolutely certain. The snow is coming. The snow is always coming. And this time, it will not melt until spring. October 28th, 1846. The snow is 5 feet deep at the pass, and it shows no sign of stopping. The Reed-Donner party has made camp at 2 locations near what they call Truckee Lake, now known as Donner Lake. The main group, 60 people, huddles in crude shelters near the eastern shore. The Donner families, 21 people, are trapped 6 miles back at Alder Creek, where a broken axle forced them to stop. They will never see each other again. Not really. When they meet again in spring, they will not recognize what they have become. Let me tell you what it feels like to be trapped by winter in the mountains. The cold is not like the cold you know. It is not the cold of a winter morning when you walk to your car. It is a living thing, a predator with infinite patience. It enters through your boots first, turning your toes black, then your fingers. Then it settles into your bones, and you cannot remember what warmth feels like. You stop shivering. That is when you know you are dying. Your body has given up trying to save itself. The shelters at Truckee Lake are not cabins. They are hovels, lean-tos made from logs and wagon canvas, roofed with pine branches and animal hides. Snow drifts against the walls until only the roofs are visible. Inside, families press together for warmth, breathing the same stale air, smelling each other's slow decay. The cabins have no windows. There is only darkness and the sound of wind and the crying of children who do not understand why there is no food. At Alder Creek, the Donner families are worse off. George Donner has injured his hand, and the wound has become infected. In a world with antibiotics, he would live. In 1846, he is already dead, just waiting for his body to accept it. His wife Tamsin tends to him in a tent barely large enough for them to lie down. Their 5 daughters huddle in another tent nearby. The snow falls and falls and falls. By November, the tents are buried completely. The Donners live underground now, in darkness, listening to the muffled sound of snow accumulating above them. Let us talk about food, or rather, the absence of it. When they first made camp in late October, they still had some supplies: flour, dried meat, beans. They rationed carefully, believing the snow would stop, the pass would clear, and they could push through. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. The food runs out. First the flour, then the dried beef, then the beans. By mid-November, they are eating boiled ox hides. You cannot imagine what this tastes like. The hide must be singed over fire to burn off the hair, then boiled for hours until it becomes a gelatinous mass that slides down your throat like glue. It provides almost no nutrition. It simply fills the stomach temporarily, quieting the screaming emptiness. When the ox hides are gone, they eat the mice that scurry through the cabins. They eat pine bark, boiled until soft. They eat the leather from their boots and belts. One man tries to eat a blanket and nearly chokes to death. The body, deprived of calories, begins to consume itself. First, the fat reserves, quickly exhausted because they have been starving since the desert crossing. Then the muscle. The body cannibalizes its own tissue to keep the brain and heart functioning. This is what starvation looks like. Sunken eyes, hollow cheeks, skin stretched over bone, teeth loose in bleeding gums, hair falling out in clumps. The children suffer worst. Their bodies have no reserves. A child can starve to death in weeks, where an adult might last months. Margaret Reed watches her 4 children grow skeletal. Virginia, 13, Patty, 8, James Jr., 5, Thomas, 3. She gives them her portions. But it is not enough. It is never enough. She prays, but God does not answer. Or perhaps He does, and the answer is no. In early December, 15 people attempt to escape. They call themselves the Forlorn Hope, though there is nothing hopeful about them. They are the strongest, the youngest, those who still have enough muscle mass to walk. They fashion snowshoes from ox bows and rawhide strips. They take 6 days of rations, though they know it will take longer than 6 days to reach the nearest settlement. They leave on December 16th, walking west toward the pass. Behind them, the remaining 62 people watch them disappear into the white nothing. Some of the 15 will survive the journey, some will not. What they do to survive will become the central horror of this story, but that tale belongs to another chapter. Back at the lake camps, December becomes January, and January becomes a test of what the human spirit can endure before it breaks. The cabins are tombs now. People stop leaving them because there is nowhere to go and no strength to go there. They lie in the darkness, conserving every calorie, speaking in whispers because speaking requires energy. Outside, the snow has buried everything. The landscape is featureless white. Even the tallest trees are only visible as dark shadows beneath the surface. This is when the diaries change. The early entries, back in spring and summer, were full of optimism, of descriptions of the landscape, of small daily events. By October, the tone darkens. By December, the entries become stark, factual, stripped of all emotion. Tamsin Donner, who once wrote about pressed flowers and the beauty of the prairie, now writes, "Snowing, no food, children crying." Margaret Reed writes, "Froze hard last night, gave the children boiled hides. They could barely swallow it." These are not literary documents, they are evidence. On Christmas Day, 1846, there is no celebration. The concept of Christmas, of joy and plenty and family gathered around a table, is obscene in this context. But some families try. Margaret Reed divides a tiny portion of ox hide among her children and tells them it is a Christmas feast. Her daughter Virginia, 13 years old, writes later that it was the saddest Christmas of her life. Not the hungriest, she notes. The hungriest days are still ahead, but the saddest because they still have hope that day. Hope is the cruelest thing. It makes you believe rescue is coming. It makes you wait. Rescue is not coming. Not yet. James Reed, who was banished back in October, has reached California. He has tried to organize rescue parties, but the winter is brutal, even at lower elevations. The mountain passes are closed. No one will attempt a rescue until February at the earliest. The trapped families do not know this. They wait, day after day, listening for the sound of voices, of approaching help. They hear only wind and the occasional crack of a tree branch breaking under the weight of snow. By mid-January, people begin to die. Not from starvation, not yet, but from the cold, from infections, from despair. Bayless Williams, a hired hand, dies first. Then Milt Elliott, one of Reed's teamsters, a young man who carried Margaret Reed's children on his back through the desert. Then Landrum Murphy, an old man who simply closes his eyes one night and does not open them again. The dead are buried in the snow because the ground is frozen solid. Or rather, they are placed in the snow. In some cases, they are simply left in the corner of the cabin until spring, because no one has the strength to move them. This is what it means for the mountains to become a prison. The walls are white. The bars are cold. The sentence is death by slow degrees. And the only way out is through a darkness that not everyone will survive. And no one will forget. The mountains do not care. The mountains never care. They simply are, eternal and indifferent. And the 87 people trapped in their shadow are learning a truth as old as humanity itself. Does not negotiate, does not forgive, And when you gamble against the house always wins. In the darkness of the cabins, lying in their own filth because they are too weak to go outside, the survivors make calculations. They count the days. They count the remaining scraps of boiled leather. They count who is weakest, who will die next. These are not pleasant thoughts, but they are necessary thoughts. Survival requires brutal honesty, and buried beneath the honesty, unspoken but growing stronger each day, is a question that no one dares to ask aloud. When the leather is gone, when the mice are gone, when there is nothing left to eat, what then? What do you do when the only thing left is each other? February 18th, 1847. After 4 months of winter, after 120 days of snow and starvation and death, the first rescue party finally reaches the lake camps. 7 men, led by a man named Reason Tucker, pushing through snow 15 feet deep. They expect to find corpses. They find something worse. They find survivors who will not meet their eyes. Survivors who speak in whispers. Survivors who beg them not to look in certain corners of the cabins, not to ask certain questions, not to write down certain things they might see. The rescuers are not prepared for what greets them. They are mountain men, hardened by years in the wilderness, familiar with death and suffering. But nothing has prepared them for this. The camps smell like something that should not exist in the world of the living. The survivors look like walking skeletons, their skin translucent, their eyes huge and hollow. Some are too weak to stand. Some cannot speak. Some have lost their minds entirely and must be restrained. But worse than the physical horror is the silence. When the rescuers ask what happened, how they survived, the survivors simply shake their heads. Some cry, some turn away. One woman, Margaret Reed, says only, "We did what we had to do." That sentence, 5 words, will become the official response to every inquiry. We did what we had to do. It explains everything and nothing. It is a door slammed shut on questions that must never be asked. The first rescue party can only take the strongest survivors, those who can walk. They select 23 people, mostly children and women who still have the strength to move. The rest must wait for additional rescue parties. This is its own kind of hell, being told that salvation has arrived, but you are too weak to be saved. Imagine watching the rescuers leave, taking your children, but leaving you behind because you cannot walk. Imagine knowing that you might die here, alone, after surviving this long. Among those who leave with the first rescue party are the Reed children: Virginia, Patty, James, and Thomas. Their mother, Margaret, is too weak to go. She watches her children disappear into the snow, not knowing if she will ever see them again. The children are carried part of the way because they cannot walk the entire distance. They will survive. They will reach California, and they will never speak publicly about what they saw in those cabins during the darkest weeks of winter. The second rescue party arrives on March 1st, then a third on March 13th, then a fourth in April. Each rescue party finds fewer survivors. Some have died in the interval between rescues. Others have simply given up, lying down in the snow and refusing to rise. The rescuers document what they find, but their reports are contradictory, vague, filled with phrases like "conditions too disturbing to detail" and "evidence of extreme measures taken for survival." These are euphemisms. These are lies of omission. These are the official record. By April 21st, 1847, the last survivor has been evacuated. Of the 87 people who entered the mountains in October, 48 survived. 39 died. Those numbers are stark and simple. What is not simple is what happened to those who died, how their bodies were found, what the survivors had to do to become survivors. The rescuers take an oath among themselves. They agree to tell only certain parts of the story. They agree to say nothing about the rest. When the survivors reach California, they are placed in different settlements, deliberately separated. This is not an accident. James Reed, who organized the rescue parties, understands that if the survivors stay together, they will talk to each other. They will compare stories. They will construct a unified narrative. He does not want a unified narrative. He wants silence. He wants them scattered and isolated, each carrying their own guilt and horror, unable to share it with anyone who would understand. The newspapers are ravenous for details. The California Star publishes the first account on February 13th, even before all the survivors have been rescued. The story is sensational, filled with claims about wolf attacks and Indian raids, none of which actually happened. Other newspapers pick up the story, and it mutates with each retelling. The New York Herald publishes an account claiming the survivors resorted to drawing lots to determine who would die next. This is not true. The Missouri Republican claims they murdered each other for food. This is also not true, or at least mostly not true. The truth is more complicated than murder and more terrible than lots. The truth is that desperate people in desperate situations make choices that would be unthinkable under normal circumstances. The truth is that the line between human and animal is thinner than we want to believe. The truth is that survival sometimes requires crossing lines that cannot be uncrossed. And the truth is that the survivors, once they understood how the public would judge them, chose silence over honesty. Some survivors do speak. Patrick Breen, who kept a diary throughout the ordeal, publishes excerpts. But his diary is careful, coded, full of euphemisms. Other survivors give brief interviews, but refuse to discuss specific details. One survivor, Louis Kesselberg, is accused of murder by other survivors who claim he killed for food. He sues for defamation and wins, but the victory is hollow. His reputation is destroyed. He will spend the rest of his life as a pariah, the scapegoat who carries the collective sin of the group. The most eloquent silence comes from Tamsin Donner. She is offered rescue in March, but refuses to leave her dying husband George. She stays behind at Alder Creek, caring for him until he dies. When the final rescue party arrives in April, they find her body in the tent, her arms wrapped around her dead husband. Her diary, the one she kept so faithfully from Springfield to the mountains, is never found. Her daughters claim they do not know what happened to it. More likely they burned it, because whatever Tamsin wrote in those final months was too dangerous to exist. Virginia Reed, only 13 when she survived the mountains, waits a year before she writes a letter about her experience. The letter is published in the Illinois Journal in 1847. It is remarkably restrained. She describes the journey, the snow, the rescue. She mentions that people died. She does not mention how some of the dead were found. She ends the letter with a single sentence that is echoed through history: "Never take no cutoffs and hurry along as fast as you can." This is the voice of trauma, reduced to a simple warning. Do not do what we did. Do not go where we went. The survivors scatter. Some change their names. Some move to remote areas where no one knows their story. Some simply lie about where they spent the winter of 1846. The Reed children grow up and refuse to discuss it. The Donner daughters grow up and tell only sanitized versions. James Reed becomes a successful businessman in San Jose and spends the rest of his life trying to rewrite the narrative, emphasizing the heroism of the rescues and minimizing everything else. Within a decade, the story begins to fade from newspapers. New scandals, new disasters capture public attention. The California gold rush of 1849 brings hundreds of thousands of new settlers west. And the Donner Party becomes just another cautionary tale, stripped of its specifics. By 1860, most accounts simply say they resorted to desperate measures without elaboration. By 1880, the story is taught in schools as a lesson about the dangers of taking shortcuts, nothing more. But the silence is not absolute. It is maintained by unspoken agreements, by social pressure, by the survivors' collective shame. When survivors meet by chance in California, they do not acknowledge each other. When their children ask questions, they change the subject. When historians come calling, they claim to remember nothing. This is not amnesia. This is deliberate forgetting. This is a community conspiracy to bury the truth so deeply that it can never be fully excavated. The question that haunts this story is not what happened. The physical evidence tells us that. The question is why the silence was so complete, so coordinated, so effective. And the answer is simple and terrible. The survivors knew that if they told the full truth, society would reject them. They would be monsters, not victims. So they told partial truths, strategic lies, and above all, they said nothing when saying nothing was possible. They chose survival, again. This time survival of their reputations, their families, their future. They chose to let the dead carry the secrets to their unmarked graves. 1848, 1 year after the rescue. America is changing faster than anyone could have predicted. Gold is discovered at Sutter's Mill in California, and within months, hundreds of thousands of people are flooding west. The California gold rush transforms the territory from a sleepy Mexican backwater into the epicenter of American dreams. And in this transformation, the story of the Donner Party becomes inconvenient. It becomes dangerous. It becomes something that must be managed, controlled, and ultimately buried. Understand what is happening here. America is selling a narrative. Come west, the narrative says. There is gold in the rivers and land for the taking. It is safe. It is easy. It is your destiny. The Donner Party contradicts this narrative. It says the West is dangerous. It says mistakes can be fatal. It says there are some horrors that civilization cannot protect you from. This message is bad for business. This message must be silenced. The first act of erasure happens in California itself. In 1848, the California territorial government commissions an official history of American settlement in the region. The historian assigned to the project is instructed to emphasize triumph, to celebrate the pioneers who built California. When he reaches the section on the Donner Party, he is told to keep it brief. Write about the rescue efforts, he is told. Write about the heroism of the men who went into the mountains to save them. Do not write about what the rescuers found. Do not write about why so few survived. The official history, when published, devotes exactly 3 paragraphs to the Donner Party. It mentions the winter, the snow, the rescue. It says that some people died of exposure and starvation. That is all. No names, no details. No uncomfortable questions. It is history as erasure, the art of telling a story by refusing to tell it. And it sets the template for how the Donner Party will be remembered, or rather not remembered, for the next 50 years. But the erasure goes deeper than official histories. It extends to the physical landscape itself. In 1850, a group of settlers near Donner Lake petitions the county to remove all traces of the winter camps. They claim the site is morbid, that it frightens travelers, that it is bad for property values. The petition is granted. The crude cabins are torn down. The debris is scattered. The trees that mark the camps are cut down. Within 5 years, there is no physical evidence that anyone camped there at all. The graves present a special problem. When the final rescue parties evacuated the survivors, they did not bury the dead. There was no time, no tools, and the ground was frozen solid. Bodies were left where they fell, covered by snow to be dealt with later. But later never came. When the snow melted in spring, scavengers found the remains: wolves, bears, birds. By summer, there was nothing left but scattered bones. And even those were collected and disposed of, buried in unmarked mass graves, or simply thrown into the lake. Today, if you visit Donner Lake, you will find a memorial. It was erected in 1918, 70 years after the tragedy. But the memorial is careful. It lists the names of the dead. It mentions the winter. It says they were trapped by snow. It does not say how they survived. It does not say what happened to the bodies. It does not say why, for decades, local residents refused to speak about what their grandparents witnessed. The memorial is another form of erasure, a monument to forgetting, disguised as remembrance. The survivors themselves participate in the erasure. Those who stayed in California changed their names or moved to remote areas. Those who returned east tell their families nothing. Virginia Reed Murphy, who wrote that famous letter in 1847, never writes about the experience again. She lives until 1921, 74 years after the ordeal. And in all those decades, she refuses every interview request, every historian who comes calling. She dies taking her full story with her. The Donner daughters are even more silent. Elitha, Leanna, Frances, and Georgia survive the mountains and are adopted by different families. They grow up, marry, have children. Their children ask them about the winter of 1846. They say only, "It was very hard. Many people died." When pressed, they change the subject. When their children persist, they become angry. One daughter, Frances, threatens to disown her son if he continues asking questions. This is not reluctance. This is terror. This is the fear that if the full truth emerges, their children will see them differently, will see them as something less than human. The destruction of documents is systematic and deliberate. Tamsin Donner's diary disappears, almost certainly burned by her daughters. Other diaries are edited, pages removed. Entries that are too specific or too disturbing simply vanished. Patrick Breen's diary survives, but only because he dies in 1868, before his family can destroy it. Even then, when it is finally published in 1879, 30 years after the events, the editors add footnotes explaining away the disturbing passages, insisting they have been misunderstood. Official records are equally suspect. The California State Archives should contain detailed reports from the rescue parties, medical examinations of the survivors, testimony from witnesses. These documents existed. They were filed. And then, mysteriously, they disappeared. A fire in 1861 destroyed some records, Others were simply misfiled and never found. Still others were removed by persons unknown for reasons unknown. What remains is fragmentary, contradictory, and carefully scrubbed of anything too explicit. Newspapers participate in the erasure by changing the narrative. The sensational accounts of 1847, which spoke explicitly about survival methods, are replaced by vague references to hardship. By 1860, newspaper articles about the Donner Party read like adventure stories. They emphasize the drama of the rescue, the harsh winter, the triumph of those who survived. They say nothing about how survival was achieved. This is not accidental. Newspaper editors understand that their readers want to believe in American exceptionalism, in the nobility of pioneers. They do not want to confront the darkness. Local histories are the most aggressive in their erasure. In Truckee, California, the town nearest to Donner Lake, the official city history published in 1890 devotes a single page to the Donner Party. The page describes the location, the winter, the rescue. It says, "The details of their survival are too disturbing for family reading and will not be included here." This is Victorian propriety used as censorship. This is the decision that some truths are not fit for public consumption. School textbooks complete the erasure. When the Donner Party appears in California history textbooks in the early 20th century, it is reduced to a cautionary tale about taking shortcuts. Students learn that the party was trapped by snow, that many died, that it was a terrible tragedy. They do not learn the specific details of survival. They do not learn why the story was suppressed. They do not learn that their teachers and textbook authors are participating in a century-long conspiracy of silence. But the silence is not perfect. It cannot be perfect. Because the descendants know. They carry the stories passed down in whispers, in deathbed confessions, in family legends that are never to be repeated outside the bloodline. They know their great-great-grandparents survived, and they know the cost of that survival. And they live with the knowledge that their existence is built on choices made in darkness, choices that society has decided must remain unexamined. This is how history is buried. Not with a single lie, but with 1,000 small omissions. Not with destruction, but with careful curation. Not with denial, but with selective memory. The Donner Party becomes a story without details, a tragedy without specifics, a horror rendered safe by distance and deliberate forgetting. America decides that this story is too dark for its founding mythology, and so the story is sanded down, smoothed over, and buried beneath layers of euphemism and time. The truth becomes rumor. The rumor becomes legend. The legend becomes sanitized history. And the real story, the full story, the story that tells us what human beings are capable of when civilization collapses, that story is locked away in unmarked graves and burned diaries, and families who change their names and move away and never speak of it again. Stand at Donner Lake today, in the 21st century, 179 years after the winter of 1846. The lake is beautiful, surrounded by pine forests and vacation homes. Tourists swim in the water during summer. Children build sandcastles on the shore. No one tells them that they are playing on a mass grave. No one mentions that the lake itself holds bones that were never recovered, scattered by currents, buried in silt, transformed into geology. The mountains remember. The mountains always remember, even when we choose to forget. The descendants are still here. They walk among us, carrying names you would not recognize because their ancestors changed them. They live in California, in Oregon, in Nevada, scattered across the West, their forebears died trying to reach. Some know their lineage, some do not. The ones who know carry a specific kind of weight, a family secret passed down in whispers, revealed only on deathbeds or not at all. Your great-great-grandmother survived the Donner Party. She did what she had to do. We do not speak of it. I spoke with a woman in Sacramento in 2019. She was 87 years old, a descendant of Virginia Reed Murphy. She asked me not to use her name. She told me that her grandmother, Virginia's daughter, made her family swear an oath. The oath was simple. Never research it. Never write about it. Never try to find out what really happened. Some doors, her grandmother told her, should stay closed. But the woman broke the oath. She went to the archives, read the censored documents, traced the family tree. She found relatives she never knew existed, descendants of other survivors who had also changed their names. They met in secret, these distant cousins, and compared family stories. The stories matched. The horror was real. And they agreed, after that single meeting, never to speak of it again. This is how trauma moves through generations. It does not disappear. It transforms. It becomes anxiety without a known source, shame without a clear origin, secrets kept so long that even the secret keepers forget why they are keeping them. The descendants of the Donner Party carry this invisible weight. They are successful, functional people. But somewhere deep in their family history is a winter that will not end. A hunger that cannot be satisfied, and choices that cannot be undone. The trail itself remains, though it is not marked as such. If you know where to look, you can still trace the Hastings cutoff across Utah and Nevada. The ruts from wagon wheels are still visible in some places, carved into rock, preserved by the desert's dryness. But there are no historical markers. There are no plaques explaining that this is where the Reed Donner Party made the choice that doomed them. The land remembers. But we have decided not to remind anyone. Here is what the story reveals about American mythology. We tell ourselves that we are a nation of pioneers, of brave individuals who conquered a wilderness through determination and virtue. The westward expansion is our founding legend, our proof that Americans are exceptional, chosen, destined for greatness. But the Donner Party reveals the lie beneath the legend. They were not exceptional. They were ordinary people who made rational decisions based on available information. They trusted a guidebook. They believed in progress. They followed the promise of a better life. And they died for it. Or worse, they survived it in ways that strip away every comforting illusion we have about human nobility. The Donner Party is the shadow story of westward expansion. For every wagon train that made it safely to California, there were others that did not. For every success story, there were failures buried in unmarked graves or erased from official records. American mythology requires heroes. It requires triumph. It cannot accommodate the Donner Party without acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, the conquest of the West was built on luck as much as virtue, and that under the right circumstances, anyone, everyone, can be reduced to their most basic survival instincts. This is why the story was silenced. Not because it was too gruesome, though it was gruesome. Not because it was too sad, though it was unbearably sad. It was silenced because it told the truth about what happens when civilization collapses, when the social contracts we depend on dissolve in the face of starvation and cold. It told the truth about what we are beneath the thin veneer of culture and morality. And that truth is incompatible with a national mythology built on the idea that Americans are somehow better, somehow more moral, somehow immune to the darkness that lives in all human hearts. The question that haunts me after researching this story for years is not what the survivors did. I know what they did. The evidence is clear despite the attempts at erasure. The question is, what would you do? Not what you think you would do, not what you hope you would do, but what would you actually do when your children are starving? When there is no food, when the only thing between you and death is a choice that will haunt you forever. The survivors of the Donner Party faced that question. They answered it. And then they spent the rest of their lives trying to forget they had to answer it at all. The story never ended. It continues in the descendants who carry the weight of their ancestors' choices. It continues in the archives, where researchers still find new documents, new evidence, new pieces of the puzzle that was deliberately scattered. It continues in the mountains themselves, where bones still surface occasionally, washed up by storms, revealed by erosion, physical proof that the past does not stay buried no matter how hard we try to bury it. In 2003, archaeologists excavated the site of one of the Donner family camps at Alder Creek. They found artifacts, buttons, broken dishes, fragments of clothing. They also found bones, animal and human, mixed together in ways that confirmed what the survivors had always refused to admit. The archaeologists published their findings in academic journals, using careful language, clinical descriptions. But the message was clear. The silence was a lie. The sanitized history was a lie. The truth was exactly as dark as the rumors suggested. And yet, even now, with DNA evidence and archaeological proof, the official history remains vague. Visit Donner Memorial State Park, read the plaques, and you will find phrases like extreme hardship, incidents, and desperate measures. You will not find specifics. You will not find honesty. Because we are still, 179 years later, protecting the mythology. We are still choosing the comfortable lie over the uncomfortable truth. The ghost trail is not just the physical path through the mountains. It is the invisible trail of trauma and silence that connects 1846 to today. It is the story we refuse to tell ourselves about who we really are and what we are really capable of when everything collapses. It is the reminder that civilization is fragile, that we are always one bad winter, one wrong turn, one series of unlucky decisions away from facing the same choices the Donner Party faced. If you found value in this exploration of America's darkest pioneer story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the Midnight Archives. Your support allows us to keep excavating these forgotten chapters, to keep asking the questions that make us uncomfortable, to keep the light burning on the stories that history tried to bury. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? These stories connect us across distance and time, reminding us that the past is never really past. The mountains are still there. The lake is still there. The trail, if you know where to look, is still there. And somewhere in the Sierra Nevada, beneath vacation homes and hiking trails and the carefully maintained amnesia of modern America, the bones are still there too. Waiting, remembering, refusing to let us forget what we did, what we are, what we might become again if the snow starts falling and does not stop. Sleep well tonight. And remember, we are all just one bad winter away from learning what we are really capable of. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep questioning the stories we tell ourselves. This has been the Midnight Archives.